And want to welcome you guys all to this Coffee with Katie session. It's a monthly networking and educational event I host for co-ops across the country as a way to give back for all the information and knowledge that was shared with me as I have been learning about co-ops over the last decade. And it's free and open to everyone. So feel free. I'm going to share the recording with everyone who's registered. You're welcome to share that recording with your board members or with fellow volunteers. And you're also welcome to invite others to attend. It's the more the merrier, really, is my philosophy. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I will share my screen with you. Okay, let's go here. Okay, we're talking today about tabling, and we are in, we're leading into the season of tabling. And what I mean by tabling really is getting our name and our co-op in front of groups of people, whether that be at events or health fairs or farmers markets. And we're going to talk through what tabling is in some regards and why it's important. And then we'll talk through some of my recommendations for effective tabling. And throughout the conversation, I'll be including tips and tricks that I find to be helpful when organizing tabling events and administering and executing them. And then we're going to spend some time talking about I can't get my words out, about evaluation and follow-up. I think that's one of the missing pieces of the puzzle when we're talking about tabling that I think is really critical to our success. So we'll get started by talking generally about tabling. So when we're getting our co-op in front of a new audience, we are making progress. And that's really our goal, is to educate the public and inform them about the co-op with the intent on them becoming members of the co-op. And if you've attended any of my sessions before or ever heard me speak, you've probably heard me say that it takes 7 to 9 touches with an individual before they're willing to make a commitment to the co-op, before they're willing to become an owner. And so tabling is an excellent way for us to make one of those touches. It's usually pretty cost effective to table. So to set up a booth or a table at an event typically is free to minimal charge. Sometimes, depending on the event, could be upwards of a few $100s. So there is a financial cost involved, but there's also the cost of our time, the coordination, the volunteer recruitment, the organization, the execution of the event. So it's important that if we are going to table, that investment, both financial and of our time, is well worth it. So we want to make sure that we're doing it effectively. In prime season, a co-op can table, upwards of 3 to 5 times a week if they wanted to. If you have the manpower, the people power, and the resources to do that, there are that many events, that many things happening when the weather is nice and people are outside and people are gathering. So it's really a great opportunity, but we have to be sure to prioritize where we're putting our effort and our energy. And if we aren't putting solid effort and energy into the event, then it's just not worth our time. And it can actually damage our reputation as an organization. Let's talk about tabling failure. What does tabling failure look like? Well, one of my favorite things to do is to walk around an event. It doesn't matter what kind of event it is. If it's the fair, or if it's the farmer's market, or a local music festival, wherever there are vendors, my favorite thing to do is to walk around and pay attention to the people staffing those booths or staffing those tables, and watch what they're doing and watch what they're not doing. What I see so many times are messy tables, stained tablecloths, unengaged staff or volunteers. So they're looking at their phone, they're talking to their neighbor, they're not participating in what they're intended to be participating in. There's no way for me to easily understand what's happening. I can't easily get information from them. Their sign is hard to read, or there isn't even a sign, and nobody in the booth seems like they're having fun. Nobody at the table looks like they're having fun. On the flip side, success looks like a professional display and a welcoming environment and volunteers who are engaged and making eye contact and smiling and looking at the people who are passing by. Their signage is really easy to read, and I can digest exactly what's happening. I know what's expected of me as someone who's passing by, and it looks like the people there are having fun. So how do we do that? How do we make our table, our booth, that successful booth? So we'll go through some of my recommendations. And I gotta move you guys here. There we go. What's most important, one of the most important things in terms of your success for tabling is your preparation. So there are three things that you need to do. There are three things you need to do to prepare. Some of these are more involved than others, and we'll spend some time digging into them. But doing your homework is one of them, creating systems, and delegating responsibility. So let's talk a little bit about what doing your homework means. It means you're asking questions. It means you're talking to the event organizer and you're asking them everything you can think of about the event. We want to be sure that the co-op is well prepared to participate if we are going to participate, or that we're well prepared to make a decision about participation. So we want to know, how much does it cost? What are the hours of the event? What's provided? Do you provide the table and chair, or do we need to bring that with us? How many people attended the event last year? What other organizations are attending? So that we can decide, okay, are we in the right mix of people here? Does it make sense for the co-op to have a presence at this event? And then you're going to want to do your research online. If this is an event that has happened before, I guarantee people have been talking about it online. There's probably they probably had an event page for last year or a Facebook page for last year. We can read reviews about the event. We can talk to people who attended the event before, and we can decide if it makes sense for the co-op to attend the event this year. And then we also want to look at the community calendar and the co-op calendar before we make a decision. Is there another really big community event taking place that weekend or that day? Is it more important? Which one's more important for us to attend? And where can we prioritize our volunteer efforts? And then we want to look at the co-op calendar too, and make sure nothing else is scheduled and that it makes sense for the co-op to attend. So the next thing that we want to do to prepare is to create systems. And there are quite a few ways we can systemize our tabling process. First one is volunteer sign up. I strongly encourage a co-op to use an electronic sign up system. So there are lots of them on the market. You can Google volunteer sign up and find a few. My favorite is Sign Up Genius, and it's easy to use, it's free to use, and the individual volunteers can create free accounts. What I like about Sign Up Genius is that it automatically sends reminders and lets the volunteers know what's expected of them. And it allows you to create categories of volunteers. So you can have a volunteer from 9 to 11 and another volunteer from 11 to 1. And you can create the structure that fits your event. So I like that. And I think that's a great way to systemize the process. The other great thing that I recommend co-ops do is create a shared calendar for your events. So probably you need two calendars, an internal calendar that your board and your committees all have access to, and that's probably going to contain a lot more information than your public facing calendar, which would just have your basic, date, location, time of events that the public could see on your website. But a shared calendar for the folks organizing your tabling activities and your outreach, as well as your board. They need to have access to the calendar as well. And then the setup, supplies, volunteer expectations, and tear down and follow up. We're going to spend some time digging through these in a little more detail in terms of the systems that you can create to make your tabling experience effective. The first thing I recommend you do is create a setup minimum. So a standardized setup that you dictate, I guess dictate's probably not the right word, that you provide to your volunteers so they know exactly how the table should be set up every time. And I recommend you even take a picture of of one of your tabling events that's set up well and include that with your instructions. But the minimum requirement, and then what you can see here is a tabling event with the Green Top Grocery manager at the time at a local, I believe this was a health fair that the co-op was attending. But the minimum things that you want to include in your setup are your table, a tablecloth, your banner, brochures, basic information about your co-op, business cards, something small and cheap that that an individual can take with them, and it's pretty inexpensive to create business cards. It looks like we have a question. I'll pause here, Mindy. You go ahead and ask your question.
It's about business cards. So
Yeah.
we talked about that last year. We have different volunteers that go to the farmers markets around the area. So is it acceptable to create like just a Rooted Carrot business card and then perhaps have the volunteer write their name on it? Or would you recommend just a straight business card with the volunteers' names printed on them?
Yeah, I think a generic business card is your best option. That's going to get the most used for you. So just a co-op business card. And I think it's a really great idea for a co-op, if you don't already have one, to have a Google Voice number or have some kind of electronic number that goes to a board member's phone number or board member's phone or something. So there is a phone number people can call. It won't get used very much, but I do like that idea, as well as your general email address, website, your social media. Yeah, I think that's fine. And if they did want to, you could even build it so that the front is the generic co-op card and the back would have a place for the volunteer to write in their contact information if they wanted to share it. But that would be up to the individual volunteer. But I think that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions while we're on questions? Okay, so I like business cards at the table because they're cheap and easy and quick, and it's a simple thing you can pass along to someone, doesn't waste a lot of paper. And me, I like to have something hard copy when to remind myself. So if I stick that in my purse or my bag later, when I'm cleaning it out, I'll be like, oh yeah, I did want to look up that co-op. I do want to see what that is. So I do like a takeaway. I know co-ops, and I do recommend even QR codes at your booth on your signage, so that you could take a QR code and then you get similar information and you lose the paper. So I like the paper. It's easier for me to manage the paper. I haven't quite mastered the electronic option, but absolutely you want something they can take with. I like to have a dry erase board and markers at an event. So if someone becomes an owner, we can take a picture of why I became an owner, and they can write it on the whiteboard, and I can take the picture and we can post it on our social media. You want to make sure you have payment processing. So if someone does become an owner, whatever that process looks like for you, whether it's on your website or QR code, or maybe it's a PayPal app someone has on their phone with a processor, whatever that is, you want to make that part of your minimum setup. And you want to make sure that you have good signage. The last thing on this list is a leadership notebook. And what that is an internal notebook. It can be an electronic Google Sheet. It can be a physical notebook, whatever works for your co-op. But it's a way for the event volunteers to note necessary follow-up. So in this instance, this picture that you're seeing here is at an Illinois State University health fair. And while we were at this event, a professor walked by and said, hey, we've got some graphic design students who are looking for a project. Is there anything that the co-op could work? I mean, is there anything we could work on for the co-op? Well, that's an excellent opportunity for the co-op and something we probably need to follow up on. And what we do is document that in that leadership notebook. So we'd write down, you know, Professor Katie Novak stopped by the booth. Here's her phone number. This is what she wants. And then afterwards, we'll talk about the follow-up required, but that gets documented so that we have proper follow-up. Someone can get in touch with Katie and ask her more about that opportunity. So this is your minimum requirements for your setup. And you have this standardized, you have all of these supplies documented, you have this checklist created of what's included, and you probably have a picture that goes along with it. So whomever is setting up the table knows exactly what to do. But there are things you can add to that. This was our very basic table before. This is a more elaborate setup at Green Top. So this includes a tent and more signage. We even have a game that we would bring to events on occasion. It was a few wicker baskets and some vegetable beanie babies that we would have kids like set it up kind of like a bag toss kind of a thing. And if they got the veggies in the basket, we would hand out a Green Top grocery tattoo to them. So something similar or simple that kids could play at the events. Any kind of freestanding display. So I've seen co-ops with large hanging banners or standing grates that signage attaches to, but additional supporting signage is could be additional items that you add to your standard setup. A chalkboard that you can set up out front. You can see this one here. In this picture, there is a whiteboard in the lower right-hand corner that we would write upcoming events, co-op events on. So something like that to draw attention to the organization, and any kind of additional signage that makes sense. If you have a bigger space or a tent or more volunteers, more stations that you might need to staff. So standardizing what that setup looks like makes it very easy for volunteers then to step into their volunteer role and make the picture happen. Take that checklist and put it into play. Now let's talk about those supplies, especially that minimum setup. I recommend that you get a big waterproof tote in your co-op colors if you can, with a lid, and put all of those supplies in it. So your tablecloth, your banner, your brochures, your business cards, your pens, your processing, your payment processor, all of that gets stored in a supply box. And we include a laminated list of those supplies and secure it to the top of the box. You could even include that picture there so that when someone opens that box, the list of supplies is right there with a photo of what to do with them. And then you can even go so far as to include the setup instructions and tear down instructions. So you could document step by step what to do. You know, unpack the table, put the tablecloth on, you know, those kinds of detailed steps. And then you want to restock that box regularly. After every event, you want to check through it, make sure all the supplies are there, you have everything you need, and there's nothing missing or nothing got left at the event. And you're really going to want to set some standard expectations. I think systemizing your volunteer process is one of the keys to success, because the folks staffing your booth are going to make or break your success. And I think if you've been tabling at an event and you've been with someone who's engaged and excited and interested, is a different experience than a volunteer who's not really into it or doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing or isn't very well trained. So standardizing that process is really important. And in terms of volunteer expectations, I like to create another checklist for volunteers that an event leader, the lead volunteer, would go over with new volunteers when they show up. And that checklist goes over four things. It goes over body language, getting the conversation started, things they should be keeping in mind as they're talking with people, and then wrapping up the conversation, how to wrap up the conversation. When it comes to body language, it's one of my expectations when I'm working a tabling event is that volunteers have all of their personal items stored away out of sight. So no bags, no phones, no coats, nothing on your person except you, maybe your co-op shirt, maybe your co-op hat. Everything else is out of sight. No, we want to make sure that that we're welcoming and open. And I used to volunteer with an individual who wore her purse on her, like a crossbody bag, the entire time. And what that told people who walked up to her was that she was going somewhere else. She wasn't here for the long haul. She was moving on. And so it gives mixed messages to the people walking by. So you really want to make sure that you have your bag is stored, your phone is stored, you are present and open. Your body language is also really important. So you want to make sure your hands are open. You're not sitting with your arms crossed or your hands on your hips or any kind of abrasive stance. You want to have open hands and smiling and open body language. You want to make sure you're making eye contact. You're smiling and engaging with every person who walks by, even if that's just to say hello. How's your day going? And you really want to be positive. You want to exude that kind of positivity. So then when we're talking with these volunteers and we're setting the expectations, the second thing we want to talk about is the conversation. So these new volunteers, they might be nervous about, what do I talk about? How do I communicate about the co-op? What do I do? So there are 3 things I like to encourage volunteers to do to get ready. Number 1 is to read our co-op brochure. So the material that you have on the table, volunteers should read it. They should know what it says. Number 2, you should have a list of your frequently asked questions available for volunteers to review. Volunteers should review that list before they get started. There's no expectation that they memorize it, you know, that's not what we're doing, but they just want to get comfortable. What are people going to ask me? What should I know how to respond to? And then the third thing that we want to do to prepare, which I kind of just lost my train of thought, is think about why you became an owner and be able to articulate that. So if I was working, let's just say Sue and I were working an event together and I was the lead volunteer, I would ask Sue, I would say, hey, Sue, think about why you became an owner. And in a few minutes, I'll ask you again. And then I want you to tell me why you did. And being able to articulate why you became an owner is important, because you can then articulate that to the folks who are walking by. And you can tell them, this is what's exciting to me about the co-op. This is why I enjoy volunteering with the co-op. And we want to encourage the volunteers to listen much more than we're speaking. In fact, I heard a statistic the other day that, and this was a sales statistic, which doesn't necessarily apply to us. I don't think of the work that we do as sales, but to some degree it is. But it said that successful salespeople listen 60% of the time, and they talk 40% of the time, which I thought was quite interesting. So we should be really giving the folks walking by the opportunity to talk to us so that we can listen to them and hear what's important to them. And I'd like to give volunteers some leading questions they can ask, like, have you heard about the co-op? What are you interested in about the co-op? If they are already aware, you know, what are you most looking forward to at the co-op? What's exciting to you about the co-op? So that you can get the conversation started and you can start that listening process. Then I also like to review with volunteers the things that they should be keeping in mind when they're working a tabling event. And the 2 key things I think are critical is, the first one is that there will be someone to help you. You know, one of the things we're going to talk about later is delegating. And when we're delegating, I think it's important that there's a leader. So each tabling event should have a lead, a volunteer leader. And so our volunteers should be encouraged to seek that leader out if and when they get asked a question that they don't know the answer to. And that will happen, and that's okay. And we want them to feel comfortable with that. The second thing we want them to keep in mind is the fact that that topic, or that statistic I shared earlier, in that it takes 7 to 9 touches for someone to become a member of the co-op, or for someone to, take the next step in ownership. And this very well may be their first interaction with the co-op. So some people are going to be really super excited. You know, this may be number 7 for them, and they're ready to sign on the dotted line. And that's really fun and exciting. But it may be number 1, it may be the first time they're hearing about us, and having that understanding and not taking it personally when someone isn't as receptive as we would like to be, as excited as we are about the co-op, and to let that process unfold naturally. And then the last piece of the puzzle when we're talking about volunteer expectations is coaching them through how to wrap the conversation up. So these conversations sometimes take 2 minutes, sometimes they take 20 minutes. You know, it depends on the individual and the questions. But when it comes time to wrapping it up, it's important to pay attention to clues in the conversation. So the example I was using previously, where someone's at our table and they're at number 7. They're super excited. They've been waiting all week for the farmers market because they really just think this co-op thing is the berries, and they couldn't wait to talk to us. That's someone whom we would wrap up the conversation by asking them to fill out their ownership app. Is this the right time for you to commit and to make an application for ownership? Would you like to become an owner today? That's a great way to wrap up that conversation. But the person number one, that first contact who's just heard about the co-op, you know, maybe the action we want them to take is to join our mailing list or to follow us on social media or even just take our business card. And so we really want to pay attention to the clues of the conversation and encourage the volunteers to wrap up the conversation in the way that seems natural and makes sense, given the conversation that's ensued. The final thing, I think one of the things that is easiest to let go of or to not prioritize is the follow-up. So we've done this event, our volunteers showed up, we had a great time, now what? And I think that's where I, as a co-op organizer, didn't always spend the time and energy that I needed to. But I would strongly recommend that you prioritize that. And there are a few things related to that that are important. One is event evaluations, one are thank you notes, using that leadership notebook, and a board report. So I'll talk about each of those in a little more detail. Event evaluation. So it's important after an event for us to talk about how it went. For us to sit down with the volunteers who were there, or if it's might be an email, there should be some form of communication about the event itself. We want to know how many people attended. And that usually, if we don't know the answer to that event or to that question, that's something the event organizer can usually easily tell us. We want to know how many email signups, how many people signed up for our mailing list at the event, how many people became owners, how many people took business cards, how many people took tattoos or whatever it is we were giving away. And how did we fit at the event? So were we kind of a fish out of water? Was this not the right event for us? Or were we right with the right people? Were we with the environmentalists and the farmers? And was this the right mix for our co-op? And then we want to document this. And this is where your shared calendar can come in very handy. As an organizer, what I would do is use that calendar. So that calendar serves as a calendar, you know, its intended purpose. So I know what's happening when, but then I open that link or I open that calendar event. So let's just say it's that health fair I was talking about earlier that Green Top attended. I open that calendar event and that's where I document these things, you know, 1,500 attendees, 10 email signups, 2 people became an owner. We had 5 volunteers, great organizational fit, lots of, what's that word? Symbiotic organizations attending. So then next year, when it comes time to attend this event again, I just pull up that calendar invitation and I can see exactly what happened. I know how, oh yeah, that's the one where all those people were there and we got a few owners and it seemed like a good use of our time. So I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, is that evaluation and that follow-up. I like to do that evaluation in person with the volunteers who attended if possible, but that's another commitment of time, but that easily can be done via email. You can send these questions to volunteers who participated via email. And you can also ask them how their personal experience was. You know, did you enjoy it? Was parking easy? Did you know where to go? Could you find the co-op easily? And include more details in the event evaluation. The second piece of the follow-up puzzle is thank you notes. I'm a huge fan of a handwritten note. In almost any case, a handwritten note is a really effective tool, especially in this day and age of thousands of emails and junk mail out the wazoo. A handwritten note that shows up in my mailbox gets my attention. So I like to send a handwritten thank you note to the event organizer. And I do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, it demonstrates professionalism and it solidifies the relationship with the organization. But the third reason I like to send that thank you note is because that's the third touch with that individual. So when we're talking about those 7 touches, I called that individual to ask about the event and told her about Green Top and signed up for the event. Then I showed up at the event. So now we're on number 2. I had a conversation with that event organizer, thanked them for inviting us and letting us attend. And now number 3, I'm sending her a card thanking her for allowing us to participate. So she's halfway to becoming an owner already. just by us doing what we're doing naturally. So I think that's critical. The second piece of the thank you note puzzle, in my opinion, is thanking the volunteers who attended. That can be an email thank you, but I think it's much more effective if you can occasionally send a snail mail thank you card. Even more effective if you can pass that thank you card around at a board meeting and have board members sign it. And so I can say, hey, Sue, really appreciate you showing up at the farmers market on Saturday. It was great that we got a few new owners, and we appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Signed by 3 or 4 board members. That's going to go a long way towards having Sue participate again. She's going to feel welcome and appreciated. And I think that's valuable use of our time. The third piece of the follow-up puzzle, in my opinion, is the follow-up, or I'm sorry, is the notebook and the follow-up related to that notebook. So that leadership notebook that I talked about, where we're taking notes about what happened at the event and what needs to follow up, what we need to do to follow up. Someone has to do that. Someone has to be responsible for that. And that may be one of the things we have written down in that leadership notebook is a question no one at the event had the answer to. The lead volunteer didn't know it. The other volunteers in support didn't know it, but we promised to tell the individual, hey, we'll get back to you. And we collected their contact information. So now we have to do that work of following up. So it's important that that role is delegated to someone, and that is their responsibility to work through that leadership notebook and check those things off. Make sure that all of that follow-up work is done. In the example I shared previously with the professor who stopped by, someone from the co-op then should be calling that professor to learn more about what the students can do and decide if this is a great match for the co-op and how can we work together. The final piece of the follow-up puzzle is a board report. So while you're going through this evaluation process and you're writing your thank you notes and you're doing your follow-up work, this is a great opportunity to write a sentence or two about the event and keep it in a document that describes what happened, so that when it comes time to submit a report to the board about what outreach activities have been going on, you've got this list of documentation of the work you've been doing. And so you don't have to go digging back through files and trying to remember, oh, did we go to that last month, or who attended that? How many people were there? You've got it all written and ready to go, ready for the board report when they ask for it. Okay, so the final piece of the puzzle, in my opinion, is delegation. It takes a lot of work to do this, tabling to do tabling effectively and at a pace that is meaningful, meaning where we can make progress. It takes a team. And so that is one of the things I recommend, is that you create a team of people who are working on tabling. And that team includes some event leaders. And I've talked about that a little bit as we've been going through the process here. Each event should have a lead volunteer or an event leader. And so in my opinion, you have a tabling committee, a tabling group. It might be your outreach team. You might have a different, there could be lots of different names for these organizations and how we organize ourselves. But you have a leader, someone who's making the outreach to get us at the event, filling out the paperwork to do it, all that stuff, coordinating what we've been talking about so far. But then you have lead volunteers, and these are 3 to 5 people on your team who agree to attend the event on behalf of the co-op and serve as the leader at the event. So they're responsible for the setup, they're responsible for the volunteer expectation setting that we talked about, they're responsible for teardown. And then you have someone who's responsible for your supplies. So that box of supplies I told you about and that minimum setup required, somebody's job is to manage those supplies. So they make sure the box is full. They make sure that all the brochures are in there. They make sure the tablecloth is clean and the banner has the right clips and the right attachments. They manage that process and make sure that the supplies are coordinated. And then you've got someone on your team who's working with communications. So that we may or may not be doing communication on behalf of these events within the co-op. There may be someone else charged with communication, but we're the liaison to that person. So the communication team knows exactly the details of the event. They know exactly what to post and when to post it and what to include in the newsletter about the event. And we are, we're touching base with all of the parties involved within the organization that need to know about the event. And then you can delegate responsibility for the calendar. Someone on your team can be responsible for entering all of these events on the calendar and documenting the follow-up, as I mentioned, on the calendar, so that next year when we go back to it, we know exactly what happened. And then the sign up itself. I recommend delegating responsibility for your electronic sign up form to an individual volunteer. And their sole responsibility is to create these forms and make sure that they're ready for the event leaders to use, and that we get them to communication so that they can distribute it in our social media and our email newsletter. But it really does take a team. This is not something that one person can do. This takes a village. It takes a village to open a co-op, and it takes a village to table for a co-op, for sure. So what questions can I answer for you? What you thinking? Bay City has their hand raised. Let's see, who was that? Was that
Yeah, that was me. Sorry, I was trying to
yeah.
get off mute and I was
That's
double
okay.
clicking and yeah, I was just curious on the electronic sign up portion. What do you generally recommend for ease of signing up at these events when you're there? Doing the electronic sign up or actually having a electronic sign up form and then printing them out for there, or do you push people right into the electronic sign up as you're there?
When you say sign up, Joe, do you mean sign up to be a volunteer or sign up to be an owner?
Like when you're doing an event, if you were to get somebody to sign up for either being an owner or a volunteer, I guess, what's the best way of going about that you've seen? Do you stick with electronic?
That's a great question. I think for a volunteer sign up is usually going to be, my observation is that usually happens electronically. So someone's going to see it in an email or on social media and have their calendar handy to check, see if they can volunteer, and they volunteer and sign up online. So volunteer sign up, absolutely recommend online. I'm not sure, there is a time and a place for a paper volunteer sign up, but I'd want to talk that through. In terms of ownership, it seems to me that co-ops are leaning more towards electronic ownership forms. That seems to be the easiest, least cumbersome, and it's the least, there's less barriers to that. So you don't have to take a payment processing app with you. You don't have to have the passwords. All of that is handled by the user on their end. That being said, some people don't like electronic sign up. So I do think it makes sense to have a paper backup and offer that to individuals who aren't comfortable with electronic sign up. But I would say that primarily co-ops are going with electronic ownership applications.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate it.
And it looks like we've had a few other people join us. Dave, looks like you've joined since we got started, and Melissa, welcome.
Thank you. I'm with the Bay City Food Cooperative as well.
Great, glad to have you here. And Susan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, the calendar you were talking about, is that a separate calendar for each event, or is it like a big calendar that includes all your different events? I wasn't quite clear on that.
Great question. Yeah, I'm talking about a shared calendar that includes all the co-op events. And Google has a shared calendar that I know lots of co-ops use, and many, like if you use Nation Builder, they have shared calendars included there. There are other ways to do it, but a shared calendar that everyone can see everything that's going on inside the co-op. Yes, Ron. You're on mute, sir.
One of the things I like at the table is John Steinman's
Yes.
This Could Be Ours magazine.
Yes.
And it is a talking Of course, paper doesn't talk, but pictures talk. And the pictures in this are co-ops from around the country. And if somebody is at all interested, I sometimes I have it sitting in my office and I forget to bring it, but this one really creates conversation. And isn't that what we want at a table?
Yes. Yes.
And, you can talk about all these great things about a co-op, but if you've got a book like this, it's amazing. And anybody that comes to the up and coming can buy these from John. He'll have a booth. Unfortunately, I only bought one, but I'd like two because we're getting close to having a store. We have a builder. I've given it to the builder, so then I didn't have it at the table. So anyhow, that's my suggestion.
Oh, that's a great one. And I should have mentioned that, Ron. That's absolutely an excellent tool. And I'm going to put a link to the to that book in the chat. You can go. You can see that. Oh, and Ron, you shared an event log too. I see that now.
All right, that's what we use.
Yeah, that's great.
Because it actually, the event log captures a lot of the things that you talked about. How many people did you talk to? Who joined? Did we sell anything? It's all in one form.
Yep. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And the John has on his website, a lot of those images are available electronically that are in that book to download for free. So you can use those images, you can create signage with those images, and you can also download them and take a laptop and put a slideshow together. And so you've got moving photos that you can point to people and say, oh, hey, look at here. Here's a prime example of what the deli could look like, or whatever the conversation you might be having.
Yeah, I did exchange some emails with John here a few weeks ago. I think there's even a link to this book so that it can be put on co-op web pages.
Yep.
We haven't done that yet, but that's one of the things I'm going to suggest that we do, because wouldn't it be fun to have members bounce around in that website and pick out their best looking store? Have a contest even.
Right. Little voting system.
Yeah, well, it's another way to engage the members. We have over 800 members, which we try to touch them, but do we really touch them well with an email? Do people read our emails?
Right.
But if we create a contest for them to pick out their best storefront, for example, in John's book, that'd be fun.
Yeah. And you could even do that at a tabling event. You could have 4 storefronts at your table, pictures, and people could vote. So there's lots of options there. Absolutely. Susan, do you have another question? I see your hand is up.
Yeah. There's also the QR code to his app for when when people are traveling, you want to visit a co-op. You could also have that QR code, like
Co-op app finder. Yep. Absolutely. I find QR codes to be much more, they're so much more user-friendly now, but they have a place more and more, I think, at our co-op tables. So you could have a QR code to his app. You could have a QR code to your email sign up, a QR code to your ownership app. You don't want 100 QR codes, but if you're strategically putting them on the right signs at the right place, I think they can be effective. Yeah. What other questions do you guys have about tabling? Yeah, go ahead, Susan. Oh, well, let's see. Sue has a question. Let's let Sue go first.
Well, we often get invited to really bad fitting events, and it feels very difficult to say no. The Easter extravaganza is one of those. This is going to be a mob of parents with screaming small kids running around, they don't want to talk about the co-op.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love kids. It sounded like it's just an inappropriate event. And it becomes something of I mean, we probably alienate the organizer by saying no.
Hmm.
Does anyone else have a problem trying to figure that out?
What I
don't.
will say, in that regard, Sue, is that as the newer the co-op is, the more risks I would take in
Mhm.
terms of event attendance. You know, so as we're growing, we don't know what's a good event or not a good event. You know, I agree with you. Probably that doesn't sound like the right fit, but maybe it is. Maybe there's a bunch of moms who are making their own baby food and they can't get access to healthy organic food, and maybe they would stop and talk to us. So I would say the younger the organization is, the more I would take a risk and attend an event that that seems like it might not be the right fit. In terms of responding to an event that we aren't attending, I think I would try to keep the relationship open and thank them for their interest. And, you know, we would like to attend. We just don't have the volunteer capacity to manage that right now, but we hope you'll keep us in mind in the future. And I wouldn't, you know, be like, no, it doesn't fit, we can't go. Which I'm sure you wouldn't do, Sue, but
No.
what other experience have you guys had with that when you had to turn down an event that's not the right fit?
Well, in this particular instance, she finally, well, could you find somebody else? And yes, I said, I will try. And then
Yeah, they were
"No, I can't
persistent.
find anybody else." I mean, it just became this real awkward.
Yeah.
It was probably the worst. And we've been invited to our large Day of the Dead celebration. It becomes the same way. You know, I mean, I love to see the people having a good time, but
Mhm.
it's noisy, there's music, they, you know, are being pulled in all directions. Those things I just don't think fit very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and absolutely. If you can't have a conversation, then it's not where we need to be. We need to be in a spot where we can talk and listen. But I think in those awkward situations, I guess just kind of professionally asserting your no. You know, no is not a bad answer. No is the answer, and we appreciate it.
This one was a little painful. I
Yeah.
guess.
Frian, did you have something to mention?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're in a small town, so I don't know how that would apply to some of the other cooperatives, but I mean, we pretty much go to everything we can, and part of that's because those touches, right? Like,
Mhm.
even if you don't have time to talk to them, even if there's no space for conversation, there's something to give away. There's something to say. You know, if you know there are gonna be a bunch of kids there, have some stuff for kids. If you know there are gonna be a bunch of
Mhm.
adults there, have some stuff for adults. But I have found that a lot of our owners who are starting to come around now, they knew about us early on, but they just had to like keep seeing us at stuff. And then finally someone was like, oh, okay, I've seen you around, let me talk to you. So like it's still worthwhile if you have enough volunteers and if you have some stuff to give away, I think, because it's really, I'm 6 years into this now, and 6 years later, I'm like, oh my gosh, I talked to you 6 years ago and you're now joining.
Oh, what's
So
happening?
yeah, so it sometimes takes time. There are a lot of slow adopters, you know, or late adopters, and they'll get around to it when they start seeing you over and over again and you look like you're legit. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say no to those things, but be prepared, right? And be prepared for not necessarily having a long conversation.
Yeah. And that consistency and professionalism is so important. When they've seen us over and over again and we're still there and we're still looking good and we're still excited and engaged, that goes a long way. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about quick, what giveaways have you used successfully? One thing I have loved are the tattoos, like the like fruits and vegetable kind of tattoos with co-op logos. I thought those are really cheap, effective things for kids. What else have you guys used for giveaways of these kinds of things?
We've done window clings.
Oh, I love those. Yes, yes.
Ron gives out zinnia seeds and shows people how, and with instructions on how to plant them.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
One of the Earth Day events we did, we had a board member make seed balls with the kids.
Nice.
We have some, had Rooted Carrot Co-op sunglasses made. And that's kind of a big hit.
Fun.
And bubbles, we go to several
Ooh,
or
bubbles.
several farmers markets and I found little bottles of bubbles.
Bubbles,
And
that's a
the
great
kids love
idea.
bubbles, the college kids loved bubbles.
Funny. That's surprising, but cool.
Eileen is on the call with me for Purple Carrot, and we just tabled an event. And we are both on One Vegetable, One Community. And so we gave away pepper seeds because that's the vegetable of the year that got voted in. And we were giving away pepper plants.
Oh, cool.
And they loved it.
That was a hit, huh? Fantastic. Okay, we have a new member who's joined us, but the name says Linda.
Let's see, I forgot to put on my dress today.
I kind
Yeah,
of thought your name wasn't Linda. Not that it couldn't be, but
I know in these days we have to be careful even making jokes about myself. I'm Buck, B-U-C-K, and I'm a board member with the Hudson, Wisconsin Hudson Grocery Cooperative. We are in the very early startup stage. We have, I think, 916 owner members right now. And we've done site study and we've done pro forma business plan type of thing. We want to launch a capital campaign in about 3 months.
oh
But we've
wow.
barely begun to start planning on it. Unfortunately, you see, I have kind of weak internet out here in the country. So once in a while, my screen will go goofy there and then I have to shut it down. I'll turn off my I'll mute myself. That may also help.
Okay, well, we're glad you're here, Buck. Thanks for joining us. And we are recording today's session, so I'll send you the recording so you can see the beginning of it too.
The Purple
We
Carrot
have-
has yard signs, and so we usually bring a couple of yard signs along for anybody to, we do it 2 different ways. We do a rotating where they don't have to pay for it. And then we do,
Ah.
well, if you want one of your own, then it's $15. And it's amazing how many people have bought yard signs.
Yeah, I found that too. Go ahead, Brian.
We've also done wooden spoons because we found on Etsy some like wooden spoons for cooking where we had somebody burn our logo into the wooden spoon. And it cost us about $3 a spoon. And we have people who sometimes we would give them away. Sometimes we have people, but donate $10. And but they seem to be really popular as well. And we're thinking about doing dish towels soon.
Ooh,
So
yeah.
just we come up with buttons, like we're always trying to we've
Buttons,
done
yeah.
Christmas tree ornaments. We've had Christmas tree ornaments the last 4 years in a row where
Oh,
somebody
wow.
made the Christmas tree ornaments for us and just put the name on there.
Well, there's a spoon. Ron's showing a spoon to us all.
Is that to everyone you speak to?
I'm
Do-
sorry.
Everyone you speak to gets a spoon?
What we usually ask for a donation, and then occasionally, like, let's say somebody signs up and becomes an owner, we're like, hey, have a spoon or have a free t-shirt, I usually give something away if somebody actually signs up that day. But often we're like, hey, if a lot of our owners show up at our table and we're like, hey, we've got some new things. You want to give us a donation for this new thing that's got our logo on it? We used to give out pint glasses. We have an ownerversary where we have when we first signed up people, we signed up 100 people like in one day, and it's right after we incorporated, so it's our ownerversary and we have a little party and we usually give out something then as well. So
Well, Cool. I've seen boards, like charcuterie kinds of boards stamped with logos. I'm sure those are a little more expensive, but those might be nice, like a promotional kind of thing. If you were giving, you know, so many owners, we grow so many owners this month, everyone gets a board or something like that. That'd be cool. All right, well, we have 2 minutes, so we probably have time for one more question if we have another question. Yes, Susan.
I was just wondering about the teams for tabling, like if you should try to get something representative of the community, like if you have a lot of older people, have one older person tabling but a younger person too, like to try to appeal to different people in your audience.
That's a great thought, Susan. Really and truly, wouldn't that be nice if we could match, you know, that? But what I have found is that it's hard enough to get volunteers that typically, you know, we're getting folks who if they sign up, we'll take you. You know, if you can be there, we'll make it work. But absolutely, I think keeping in mind demographics and ethnicity and matching, you know, if we can get the right people there to match, you know, to relate to the folks in attendance, I think that would be cool. But then again, you're implying or imposing some kind of requirements for volunteering, you know, and so you don't want to turn someone away just because they're, you know, you don't want to do the reverse of what you're trying to do and make it is not as welcoming of an opportunity for the volunteer side of things. So I think I mean, if we can make that happen and it happens organically, I'm all for it. Okay, we're right at 1 o'clock. Time sure flies when we're having fun, folks. I appreciate y'all being here. As I've said, I'm recording the session, so I'll get it sent out later this afternoon as soon as that link comes in that it's available. And you're welcome to share it with whomever you'd like to within your organization. And we'll do this again next month. And I'm always open to topics. So if you have ideas of what we should talk about next month, shoot me a note. I'd be happy to hear it.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.